Right, so we just had the civil parking enforcement, and I was using Zoom to give a presentation without someone else helping me for the first time, and it didn't go brilliantly, and I forgot to press record on my presentation about at the beginning of things. So we recorded the question and answer separately, and this is the presentation bit that you'll have missed if you weren't able to make it to the meeting. Okay, so I will just share my screen, share here. And off we go. So this is about civil parking enforcement, and it's the council taking over the responsibilities instead of the police. And this is a lovely picture of the High Street in Wheatley. So the history of this: on the 13th of October 2020, the Conservative cabinet, running Oxfordshire County Council at the time, agreed to write to the Secretary of State to take on the powers to enforce parking infringements. Of course, it goes back much further than that, and lots of people across the districts have been calling for civil parking enforcement because the police simply aren't doing it. And I'm putting no blame on the police. They've got much more important things to do, like solving crimes. So at the time, this is what the country looked like. The Cherwell District Council is right in the middle of the map, the yellow one there. There's us, South Oxfordshire District Council, and the Vale. We're 3 of 12 that doesn't have civil parking enforcement. So we were a complete anomaly. Even Oxford City and West Oxfordshire had the power to issue fines to people contravening regulations. And at the time, the independent cabinet member, Mark Gray, Benson he represented, he said, we haven't had wardens for probably 10 years in the south of the county, and as a result, nobody takes any notice at all of the double yellow lines. I'm delighted to see this. Our towns are choking. And that is certainly the case in Wheatley. It hasn't been enforced much longer than that, I think about 14 years. And people have cottoned on to the fact that the police are not doing it and they're parking with impunity. And that has ramifications for people using Wheatley as a kind of park and ride, just parking up and getting the bus into Oxford or Tame. And quite chaos around the schools. So there are a few hot spots even in Wheatley. The Conservative cabinet member Yvonne Constance said, we can't expect the police to do it. The results in our town is parking mayhem. So there was a cross-party acceptance because it was supported at the time by the Vale, which was Liberal Democrat controlled, South Oxfordshire District Council, which is Lib Dem and Green, and then the Conservatives running Cherwell. All of the groups concurred that we should have civil parking enforcement so that we can actually tackle hotspots. Just to let you know what happened from that point on. So when Yvonne made that decision, the County Council spent £250,000 fixing the worn out signs and lines. And that's what we're seeing at the moment on the High Street. They're redoing some of the lines because obviously you can't enforce if there aren't valid lines. And then the districts put in about £60,000 each. So in total, it's cost about £430,000 to bring everything up to standard. And the parishes, across the piece have also been spending a lot of money and have done historically for years and years. They've tried to put in measures so that they can the village can look as we want it to look, the community wants it to look, and this is the disabled spots next to the shops in the Wheatley. So these were paid for some time ago by the parish council with the view to them actually being adhered to, and I think largely they are. But if you were to contravene that, and park there without a blue badge, no one would do anything about it as it stands. So the actual scheme, there will be no changes to the lines and signs. So everything that's existing is going to stay as it is. So historically, for whatever reason, the community put up 2-hour bays on the High Street and 1-hour bays outside the shops and double yellow lines in various parts around the village. And those are not changing. All that's happening, the only change that will happen on the 1st of November is the authority that is going to do the enforcement, and that will change from the police to the county council through a company that's going to be providing that service for us called Conduit. There'll be a small number of traffic enforcement officers covering south of Oxfordshire. So it's not going to be heavy-handed. You know, they've got a wide area to enforce, all the way from Henley up to us in Wheatley. And so, you know, it's not going to be overbearing from day one. There are charges and civil enforcement officers will not receive a bonus for or incentives for issuing more tickets. So it's very explicit. The government has said that we can't use these rules to create a surplus and create loads of money to fund the council. Any money that is used will pay for the service itself, so pay for traffic officers and for environmental reasons to provide, you know, a better environment on the roads. So the advantages are that parishioners can now actually, through the district and county representatives, will be able to direct resources to tackle hotspots and problems. They'll allow us to tackle inconsiderate parking at places like schools, and as we know, every morning this is a real problem area in Wheatley. But I would say, as we can see from this picture now, there is no double yellow lines there. There's only a small set of double yellow lines actually at the entrance. So there's no regulations to be enforced here. So that would be a change that the parish council would have to request, pay for, before we could actually do anything there. But it means we can put these new measures in with the hope of them actually being enforced. We can ensure that emergency vehicles can get through so there's not dangerous blockages, and we can give traders peace of mind that places near their shops won't be blocked all day. And we picture here the cornfields in the centre of Wheatley. There's a 1 hour spot, and this van driver, he's just parked there now, and I'm sure he's abiding by the rules. But in theory, he could effectively park there all day. And at the moment, under the current regime, very little would be done about that, unless the police were called. The drawbacks are obviously, given that there's been no enforcement over a decade, some of the restrictions could well be redundant, and people will obviously have to pay fines, and in some places pay and display, but this will not be happening in Wheatley. So the next steps and solutions. Okay, so if the parish council wants to change how they administer the situation, then they can request a change. Changes could include residence permit parking, removal of waiting restrictions entirely, or the addition of yellow lines to enforce new areas, as I've suggested, might be desirable around the school. But this comes at a cost, and it requires a traffic regulation order, which will be £3,000 in legal fees, and then depending on the scale of the scheme, could be as little as about £1,000 for double yellow lines. But if it was a residence parking permit scheme covering several streets, that could be in excess of £10,000. It's probably, the high street's probably about £10,000. But that would have to be costed up, so there's no commitment to that price exactly. Charges to parking restrictions are also subject to formal consultation with the public, so we'd have to, you know, see what the public said, and it could take up to 6 to 8 months. We're expecting a huge number of these requests across the district because, as I say, with them not being enforced for over a decade, there are redundant areas and the signs are no longer required and don't function as they were originally intended. So we are expecting parishes to flag up a lot of these, and so there'll be a big body of work to do. So our policy and our next step: if a change is requested and payment committed by parish, we will not enforce the restrictions until they're resolved. So that will mean we'll revoke or suspend the current order. And if the parish decides to make changes, I will assist with paying for this. I get £15,000 over 2 years. It's called a priority fund that each member of the county council gets, and I will supply £4,000 of this from my priority fund towards the parish to make these changes. The Merry Bells Management Company have not indicated that they will bring in any charges on their car park, so that will remain free. And there are no imminent plans to bring in enforcement or changes to the South Oxfordshire District Council car park, although we will monitor the situation and reserve the right to do so in the future. So that is the situation in brief. So I had to rattle through that. This is the second time I've done that this evening. This time I have recorded it. Essentially, we're bringing this in because we had to bring it in across the whole of the 3 districts so that we can tackle problem areas elsewhere. We're not bringing this in specifically to tackle any issue in Wheatley, although it has been called for on a number of occasions over a number of years by the parish and frustrated residents. And there is a solution to the high street problem in so much as we can bring in a residence parking permit scheme, but that will cost money and it'll have to be requested by the parish council to do so, and they will have to pay for it, and I will contribute from my priority fund. So there really is a solution there if that's what the village want to do. You could have residence permits or 2 hours, and most people would be familiar with similar schemes in Oxford. You can park for 2 hours in certain places, or if you're a resident, you can park there any time. From day one, we're not going to come down heavy-handed. We're going to, but we can't. What we can't do is have sort of a backdoor deal, a gentleman's agreement that actually Conduent won't enforce the Wheatley High Street. But at the same time, we're going to take a very pragmatic decision and be sensible about this. And while there's discussions going on, we're not going to be heavy-handed about our enforcement. And we will, if the council, parish council, want to go down this route, then we will suspend the order, so there'll be no enforcement until the new measures are put in place. So hopefully that all makes sense. Do feel free to email me or contact me on Facebook if you've got any questions. Thank you.